Moses, take fragrant spices, gum resin, onycha, and galbanum, and pure frankincense, all in equal amounts.
Okay, so it was used by Moses to do what? Well, it doesn't read on, but when you read on, you bring them all in equal amounts, and that's what they were going to burn on the altar.
Our God is greater, our God is stronger, God, you are higher than any other. Where you go, I'll go, where you stay, I'll stay.
Okay, Leviticus 2:1. Yes.
When anyone brings a grain offering to the Lord, their offering is to be the finest
Flour.
Okay. They are to pour olive oil on it, put incense on it, and take it to Aaron's sons, the priests.
Okay. So they brought these gifts and they put incense in it as well. All right. Who has Jeremiah 41:5? Yes.
80 men who have shaved off their beards, torched their clothes, and cut themselves came from Shechem, I believe that's how you say it, Shiloh, and Samaria, bringing grain offerings and incense with them to the house of the Lord.
All right. And we have Malachi 1:11. My name will be great among the nations, from the rising to the setting of the sun. In every place, incense and pure offerings will be brought to my name, because my name will be great among the nations, says the Lord Almighty. It's an interesting thing. Frankincense was involved in what then?
Burials.
Well, offerings and worship. And it's interesting because we had the gold was what? Focused on the fact that he was what? A king. And here, frankincense is a huge part in the Old Testament of worship. So when you look at making it real here, this whole thing about why would the Magi give Mary and Joseph frankincense? What were they doing? Worshiping God. Worshiping Jesus. Do you think Mary and Joseph would have recognized this as their motivation? Would they understand what frankincense is?
Probably not.
They might. Mary and Joseph were both of the line of David, but guess who Mary's cousin was? Elizabeth. And guess who Elizabeth was married to? Zachariah. So they might have. They smelled the incense. Incense was part of something that people would give too. Frankincense was basically white, like a white powdery incense. And let's be frank about this. In the Old Testament, what was a common component of their worship was burning of incense. And what other was involved with worship in the Old Testament? Sacrificing animals. They would come and do that, offering up. What else? Oh, that's gross. What else? What else would they do? Sing? Guys, what do you, when you think of worship, what is worship and what's involved in it? Praying. Praying is an aspect of worship. Singing is. Depends where you go. There's a lot of different other aspects of worship, you could say. Let's go to Romans. Romans 12, 1 through 3. You already there? Read it. Therefore, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. For this is your spiritual act of worship.
Can I read it now?
Yes.
Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve that God's will is his good, pleasing, and perfect will. For the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you.
Okay. So what is the true and proper worship that Romans 12:1 says?
Offer your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God.
How much of your bodies?
All 100%.
It says your bodies, all of it.
What's involved with that?
Your heart,
Heart? What else?
brain,
Brain,
Soul.
soul, everything. Have you ever, all to Jesus I surrender, all to him? Remember this? All to Jesus I surrender. Have you heard the popular version? Some to Jesus I surrender, parts of me I truly give. Well, that's really the popularized version. It's an interesting thing. What is worship? You give your life. So what do you think it means to be a living sacrifice? And how is that like an Old Testament sacrifice of an animal? Yes?
you're like, you're giving yourself to God. So you're just letting him take over, kind of. Not take over, but what's like, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yes.
I was gonna say, you know how you can, surrender your body to God to, like, my motto, what would Jesus do? Like, there's a poor person and he's hungry, buy him a hamburger to eat. If there's an old lady that can't get all her groceries into the car, go help her out, put the groceries in the car.
All right. So giving your life, is that easy?
no,
Nope.
Why?
because if God's perfect, kind of makes you seem like he would judge you in some way.
Is that what this is saying, though?
No.
This is saying what? Take me. Now, does that mean everybody would have to go into ministry?
No.
Well, aren't you? Is everybody in ministry?
Yes.
We're all ministers.
We're all in the mission field.
We are all ministers. And you know, it's funny. When I became in ministry, people started treating me differently. And the weird part about it is, I was in ministry when I accepted Christ. We are all ministers. We're all looking for people to love on and to help. And it's an interesting thing. But we're all ministries. So how is that like an Old Testament sacrifice? Well, the sacrifice of an animal meant its death. What's it mean to us when we give our life to him?
We're becoming life.
We are, but what do we have to do first? What did the animals have to do when they were sacrificed?
Die.
Let me just say, you don't take the fat off the kidneys while they're alive. Why do you think God says this is worship instead of just singing songs or something? Why do you think offering your body as a living sacrifice is worship rather than just singing songs? Yeah.
You're giving your life to God, and that's what God wants you to do. He wants you to come to him for free will, instead of just singing and like, oh, whatever God, like, yeah, I'm believing in him.
So do you do that once?
No, you keep doing it because you're not perfect.
Okay. Is that something you guys think about when you wake up? Sometimes you think, crud, I'm late. Let me just get ready for school. Oh no. I don't want to get up. It's cold outside. I will tell you one thing. Well, that little aside will take us down the wrong road. Can people sing songs and not really love Jesus?
Yeah.
Can they sing beautiful Jesus songs and not really love him?
No.
Yes.
Oh yeah, they can. And it's funny. Can people study the Old Testament and not believe in God?
That's what Mormons do, isn't it?
Well, they do. and they sing. Some would say they love God, but the problem is they're so whacked. Their God is not our God. Elohim was just a man who got it right, repopulated the world. I won't get into that too much more. You can sing songs and not really love Jesus. Can you pray prayers and not really follow Jesus? How many people do you think pray to God like, oh, God, help me? And my next door neighbors in New Jersey, they were across the street actually, and they grew up Italian Catholic and then they became Buddhist. And their daughter always said, oh my God. And I kept trying to say, you have one. There is no God in Buddhism. I mean, the whole point of Buddhism is you live such an amazing life that you cease to exist. That's a goal. I just don't get it. But anyway, you can pray prayers and not really follow Jesus. Can you submit your whole life to Jesus and fake it?
Yeah.
Well, you could.
I got not a chance.
Huh?
I mean, I wrote not a chance.
I mean, how
Well, you can
Huh?
hide it, though.
could you hide it?
Yeah.
If you truly submitted your whole life to Christ and said, okay, you use it, is he going to hide it?
He could.
Now, have you ever met an undercover Christian?
Yes.
Remember that term? I know a lot of people, oh, I'm a Christian, don't tell anybody.
I mean, why not?
Well, guys, you're getting to the point where being a Christian isn't all that popular sometimes because we're all mean. Well, the media will say that we're all mean and we're mean to people and we're mean. We don't honor people and all their beliefs. And I'm like,
Are you sure?
well, you're going to hear that. You're going to hear it, and it's tough. Sometimes if you say you're a Christian, people are going to come up and say, do you hate all these people that are sinners?
No, because I'm a sinner.
Does it happen to you? Yeah. And see, the hard part is you're going to get that. But here's that thing. Can you submit your whole life to Jesus and fake it? Well, I think, it's funny, as you grow in him, the more he uses you, are you really going to remain hidden?
No.
How many of you guys ever saw that movie Santa Claus with the guy that was in Tim to Tool Time? What's his name?
Tim Allen.
Tim Allen. Was it just Santa or Santa Claus?
It was Santa Claus.
Santa Claus.
It was funny in that movie because he becomes Santa Claus. This is a bad example. Except he becomes Santa Claus. He doesn't think he's Santa Claus, but suddenly all the kids come up and say, hey, I want this. Because the kids see it in him. And I'm bringing this up because if you truly give your life to Christ, people are going to start seeing it in you. I'll be sitting in restaurants and stuff. People come up and sit down and start talking to me, and start confessing things to me. And they don't necessarily even know I'm a pastor yet, but it's him and me. People will start seeing him in you, and they don't understand why they're drawn to you until they realize, till later that will come out. You're gonna find that out. I had people that they wouldn't come and tell me jokes because I didn't say those kind of jokes. In fact, they'd start telling a joke. Oh, Dan, I'm sorry. We'll talk about it in a minute. But man, when they were hurting, they came and talked to me. And that's because, can you truly submit? Now here's the point. Look at those questions. Can you sing songs and not really worship him?
Mm-hmm.
Can you pray and not really believe in him?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you sing songs, pray? Can you all these things? However, can you truly submit to him and not have it real?
No, because I would be truly submitted.
You're right. Now, your point is very good. Do we have to do that every day?
Yes.
It really has to be a choice. Can he make you submit? I suppose He doesn't, though, does he?
He could, but he won't because it's your will.
Yeah. Now, I will tell you, there's been times when I've been knocked to my knees. But that was mostly because I was stupid. And there's an aspect of discipline there. All right. Just continue to the next page and look at this. Going back to 2 and 3. What does verse 2 say not to do?
Do not conform to the pattern of this world.
Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Why? What's the pattern of this world? Sin? Destruction? Violence? Selfishness? Do you think selfishness? I think that's probably the biggest part of sin in a lot of ways. Selfishness. I want it. I deserve it. And I do that, in that respect. Don't conform to it. What's that mean, not to conform to something? Not to be it?
Yeah, don't be selfish.
Don't conform to it. Don't be like it. If you think about molded, my hand conforms to this bottle. Basically, in one sense, I'm embracing. You know what I mean? I'm bringing in the pattern of this world, and if the pattern of this world is bad, then I'm going to be in a bad pattern. Okay, what does verse say we should do?
Be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Transformed by the renewing of our mind. If I'm transformed, what's transformed? We should transform by the renewing of our minds. How do you renew your mind? Praying could do it. What else?
Give yourselves to God.
You give yourself to God. How does that renew your mind, though? What are you doing?
Stop letting everything evil come into your mind.
Yes.
Worshiping.
Worshiping? How about this? If you watch something you're not supposed to watch, would you say you're renewing your mind, or would you say you're conforming to the pattern of this world?
Conforming to the pattern.
Forming.
Okay. Does that ever happen?
Yeah.
Yikes. I hate that part. So how do you transform your mind? What are we doing right now? What are we reading? Aha. How many of you guys actually read the Bible every day? Okay.
I have a devotion.
Does it help? What happens when you don't wake up early enough, or you don't do it and you don't read it? So, what should we do? We should transform our minds by reading and doing the good things. Okay? Like going to youth group on Wednesday. And as warped as I can be sometimes, especially Beth, but as warped as this is still renewing our minds, because we get to talk about the cool things. Verse 3, yes. Oh. What happens when we do this, and what are we able to do? If we transform our minds, if we don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but we transform our minds, renew our minds, what does it say we'll be able to do? And not see through walls, or?
You will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will.
You guys are at a point in your lives, and that will be something I'm hoping you're thinking about. What does God want you to do? I know. But what does God want you to do? And you know what's really cool? If you don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, meaning watch all that crap and do all those things, instead you fill your mind up with this stuff and you listen to Him and you read His Word, guess what you're going to start figuring out?
God.
You're going to see what He wants you to do. And here, let me just tell you this from being 50 plus-ish. When you do what He wants you to do, it's really good. It truly is. When you don't do what He wants you to do, it's not so good. There's things like, God, I really don't want to listen to that. I want to go do this. And I'm telling you, it doesn't work out. If I'm a loving father, and I am a loving father, I love my kids. I don't always like them.
You talked about that.
Yeah, I don't always like them, but I do love them. And if I love my kids, do I want to have the best for them?
Yes.
And if God is all perfect and all-knowing, His will for your life, it'd be the best. So, if you don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but are transformed by the renewing of your mind, then you'll be able to test and prove what God's will is, as good, pleasing, and perfect will. Dude, you guys would be great. All right. Verse 3 tells us that what the basis of all this is. One comes from God, and one comes from our attitude. What comes from God? In verse 3.
For by the grace given to me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distribute to each of you.
Or you know what? God has given you. Okay. For by the grace given me, what comes from God? Grace. What's grace? Remember what the definition of grace is?
Good. God's riches at Christ's expense.
That's fun. I love acronyms. Grace is unmerited favor, meaning you guys smell and you still got great things given to you. There's no reason you should have got great things given to you because you just smell. One comes from God and one comes from our attitudes. What comes from God? Well, we got what comes from God is grace. What's our attitude? Have you guys ever thought more highly of yourself than you should have?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, and part of that highly stuff is when I think about me more than others.
Oh,
And see, guys, that's really what it means. How many of you guys are a little self-conscious sometimes? Yeah, that should be everybody. I mean, everybody, there's a time when we're self-conscious. You should have saw me trying on ugly sweaters. It's hilarious. Selfishness, what's the attitude we're supposed to have?
Sober judgment,
Sober judgment. You know what that means?
putting others before yourself.
Yep. And the big key word, there's a key word to that. Sober judgment is another word for humility. I did that. I told you in that one sermon, I was talking about humility, and I told you, I was telling the congregation, humility is an incredibly important aspect of leadership. In fact, I easily am the most humble person in this room. I would kick all your little humble butts. And like this, and I was going over this whole thing, which, does that sound very humble?
No.
No. Which was the point. I was being facetious. And,
Good job.
and so I was being, or both really. I was being both. And so I had this sweet older woman come up and say, Pastor, that made me sound very humble. So she got it. Anyway, our attitude should not be one of our own self, but of others. We put humility. Christ showed that. Matthew 2:2. Go to Matthew 2:2 quick.
And asked, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? We saw his star and he rose and have come to worship him.
The Magi came from afar, and they came to worship him. So if you look at that, what is the Magi's purpose?
to worship.
To come worship him. How should their purpose be like our purpose?
Should worship God.
You're right. We should worship God. In the Bible, God actually says we need to worship Jesus. He says that. Now, it's interesting. In the Old Testament, God said, you shall not worship any other gods but me. And yet God says to worship Jesus. Why?
Jesus is God.
Bazing!
Isn't it God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit? But they're
All
all one.
one. Three in one. It's a miracle.
Schizophrenia.
No, it's Jesus.
It's Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit. And the funny thing is, here's what's interesting. There's several religions, and one that's very strong in this area, Mormonism, that doesn't believe Jesus was God. He is a God now. But he was the Son, he was the Son of God, just like Lucifer was. That's Mormonism. So we see in this thing that the three wise men came to worship him. We're told to worship him. And yet God says, don't worship anybody but me. Yet he says, worship Jesus. So that's a proof that Jesus is God. And I bring that up because, what is our purpose? It should be to worship. Now, we don't have frankincense to give. What should we give instead?
Ourselves.
Yes!
Give of ourselves.
You are batting fast.
She's a beast on this one.
I know.
That's amazing. I don't care what her brother was saying about her. I think she's amazing.
What did your brother say?
I start problem. My middle name was Stick for a real long time because I stir up stuff. And they decided to change it, because maybe hopefully encourage me. Keeps moving everywhere. I think you have a sickness. Did you see that Skittles commercial? With this,
Squirrel.
Yeah.
with this Skittles all over and says,
Skittle Pops.
Oh, yeah.
Skittle Pox. It says, are they?
Is it contagious?
And then she's covered with Skittles. It was hilarious. You didn't see that either. Okay.
That was hilarious.
Was it on football games?
Yeah, I think it was during. No, right now it's mostly on the Hallmark channel of
It's on YouTube too.
and
It's a YouTube.
Christmas.
I saw it on YouTube.
Well, I
Christmas,
watch all those, but that's
Christmas movies. Up, brother. Hey, your coffee cup's right there.
Thank you.
I get this phone call from his wife, and is this coffee cup in the church? Because he took mine.
Mine's all chewed up from the dog.
You gotta stop eating that milk bone creamer. All right. How do we do that, practically speaking? How do we give our lives to God?
We submit to it?
Oh, yeah.
You submit to Him. How do you do that?
Put everything you have in the cup.
Okay. And worship Him.
If you're go around and
Help
help people.
people.
Giving your heart to Him?
Give your heart to Him. Hey guys, does He talk? Does He move you? Have you ever noticed something that you would not have normally noticed? Maybe like a need around you or something like that? It's really interesting because on our selfish little selves, we can go around and I don't care really about you, but I'm looking over, I just care about me. And yes.
They're called cell phones.
Cell phones. That's hilarious.
Yeah, because they don't pay
That's
attention.
true. People don't pay attention. Today I left my house and left my phone there for 3 hours.
Good job.
I had to see a therapist, and the separation anxiety.
Nothing to lose your head over.
My phone can be turned off. I just have to have a hold of it. It feels odd if I don't have it.
What?
Because my phone can be
It's a
turned
whole
off.
Lord of the Rings
I
thing. It's getting
don't
me
even
back.
use it, but if it's like on me, I'm fine.
No, my problem is I don't know what pastors did without these, other than they had a life. And but I will tell you, these are nice when it comes to being a shepherd of a flock, because
You can talk to 18 different people at once about the same thing.
well, the biggest thing is and I'm trying to train the church this, and I say that in a neat way. I've called up and I found out people were in the hospital or something happened and they didn't call.
Oh yeah, and they expected you to worship them and pray for them.
Well, or pray for them, and I don't mind doing that anytime, but it's hard to shepherd a flock if you don't know they're hurting. And you can't know that because unlike Jesus, who knew all those things, I don't. So, there was some very stubborn woman this week that was having things done. And when I told her I'd pick her up at the hospital and take her home and do a couple of things, oh no, I don't want to bother you. Well, that's no bother. Guys, you know what? Do you guys love helping people? That's a sign that He is in you. Because that's the coolest thing to me. When you're doing His work, there is nothing better. I mean, that joy you have when you've helped somebody, especially if you've helped somebody and they look around and who did this? That one time I got all those shopping carts. I told you about that. When I got all those shopping carts, that was hilarious. Ernie came out. He calls me all the time. It drives me crazy. He's looking around. He wants us to pray for him. And he has a job in Walmart. He called me up today and says, would you have your group pray for me today? He got written up at Walmart for putting pine sol in his soap water because it's mixing chemicals. It was only soap. And they put pine sol to help it smell better in the restrooms in Walmart. And he... Huh? Pine sol smells.
You just don't want to mix chlorine.
Oh, no, you can't do Clorox and pneumonia. That's a really bad thing. Unless you don't mind getting really sick.
Water and chlorine.
Yeah, because then that also kicks up to...
I've seen people.
You'll pass away, pass out.
No,
out.
they just pass out. No, with their lungs after.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. And it can, depending on it. But it wasn't chlorine, it was pine sol.
Yeah, pine sol and water. So
Mine.
Pine sol soap is not... But anyway, we got to pray for Ernie because he got written up. And I think one thing sometimes about people with Asperger's, they're not necessarily the fastest workers.
But they do a great job.
is this in North Carolina?
Yeah, this is in New Jersey.
New
but
Jersey?
He's a 48-year-old gentleman that was in my church, and he works for Walmart. His parents passed away, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but he has an apartment and drives to work, but he doesn't understand human interaction. He doesn't understand it. He does not understand jokes. I mean, they're like,
Yeah. Have you ever read the book The Rosie Project?
is that about an Asperger's?
Yeah. It's hilarious.
It is hilarious. I have so much fun with Ernie. Ernie has been some of the funniest things in my life. Mostly, not really his expense, it's just who Ernie was. There was one prayer time, I had to stop the car on the way home, I started laughing again.